Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for attending. The lights are so bright, we can't tell if the room is crowded or empty.
It's crowded.
So we're going to assume it's crowded, even though it's like the last talk on the last day. So today's panel is going to be on perspectives of international kind of workforce. And what we wanted to talk about are the challenges in moving and getting set up, and how perhaps people in the audience can help their team or their graduate students when they make a move, because there's a lot of details that people are unaware of. And one of my favorite stories is of a woman who moved to LA and didn't know she needed a car and ended up taking the bus 2 hours each way to school. So things happen that people don't plan for, and this is what we wanted to talk about today, as well as cultural differences. So let's start with getting everybody to introduce themselves. We'll start with Ming.
Me. All right. Thank you so much, Denise, for inviting me here. My name's Ming. I am working for Atom Computing. We're a neutral atom quantum computing company. I am doing theory there as a theory manager. And yeah, maybe if we want more details, we can come back. But I'll let Max would be the next.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for the invitation to speak on this panel. My name is Max Roof. I'm a research scientist at SandboxAQ. SandboxAQ is a spin-out out of Alphabet or Google, more colloquially, in January of 2022. We do 3 main product lines. The first one is about agile cryptography management for large-scale enterprises. The second one is about classical simulation of quantum systems, sometimes combining that with AI for drug discovery and new materials development. And then the third roadmap is the one that I actually sit in with most of my time, which is in quantum sensing, where we have 2 applications. The first one on an alternative navigation system to GPS using the magnetic anomalies of the Earth. And then the second one on a healthcare application, where we're focused around measuring the magnetic field emitted by your heart to better detect heart diseases that are, of course, as we all know, the #1 cause of death in the world, unfortunately.
Hello, everyone. Bahrami from Wolfram Research. I am managing academic innovation team. My team is highly involved on 2 topics, quantum and large language models. Our company, Wolfram Research, we have 2 very popular products. One of them is Wolfram Mathematica, and the other one is Wolfram Alpha. Wolfram Alpha is widely being used by pre-college students, and then college students, graduate students, postdoc. They usually use Mathematica. So we can discuss about more details later. Yeah. Passing to Preeti.
Hi, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here. Thanks to Q2B and Denise for inviting me. My name is Preeti Chalsani. I'm based in Chicago. I head industry partnerships for the Chicago Quantum Exchange, which is a consortium of 6 research institutions and about 40 corporate and nonprofit partners. The research institutions are all based in and around Chicago. The CQE, or the Chicago Quantum Exchange, was launched in 2017. And in 2021, we also launched an accelerator program for quantum startups, quantum and enabling startups. It's called Duality. I'm also the deputy director for that and helped launch it. So again, happy to discuss more about that later, but over to you.
All right, thanks. Mic on. Okay. So what I wanted to hear from each panelist is kind of about your journey. So where were you born, what your education is, and where you got it, and just different jobs and moves that you've experienced. I think Max has a particularly interesting story. So maybe we'll start with Max.
Yeah, sure. So I was actually born right here in Santa Clara. My dad was a postdoc at IBM in the 90s. I often make this joke that there's nothing American about me except for my passport. But actually that might be changing now that I've been living here for 2 years and I guess like become a little bit American in some sense. So I actually grew up, we moved back to Germany, to Bavaria when I was 6 months old, grew up in beautiful Bavaria, did my undergrad there in physics, and that's really when I first got in touch with quantum at a deeper level as a what they call working student, so kind of a research assistant at the Max Planck Institute for Quantum Physics or Quantum Optics. And then a friend actually told me about a program that I was really excited about, which was an academic exchange program to do an internship in undergrad in research laboratories abroad. Really liked that, and the problem was the deadline was actually 2 days from then. I still needed to do language testing, all of that, so that was interesting, 48 hours, but I think that really shaped my path. Then got accepted into an internship at McGill University in Montreal for a summer, where it was really the first contact, with quantum research, really in the lab, also driving it myself. Really liked it, wanted to go international. They offered a scholarship to come back, so I was like, this is perfect. Also, Montreal is an amazing city for those of you that haven't been there. I know you've also lived there before and experienced it for yourself. Had a great time there, working in a quantum lab as well. For my PhD, then I knew 2 things. I knew I wanted to go back to Europe, but I also knew that I wanted to work in a top quantum group really in the world, and found that combination then at QTech at TU Delft in the Netherlands in Ronald Hansson's group, where we're building these large-scale entanglement distribution networks, things like loophole-free bell tests and stuff like that. Actually got approached during my PhD then to do an internship at Google X. They reached out and were like, hey, it would be great to have you here working on some technology that's very close to your PhD. Had that all already arranged, but then we all know what happened in March 2020. That was when COVID happened, so Google completely shut down, no more lab work, and so I couldn't come, unfortunately. There was also a bit of a challenge there, I think, because in Europe it's really not very common to do an industry internship, and your PhD was probably actually the only kind of conflict I had with Ron in my PhD around the topic, like on how to fit it into my schedule. And then luckily there was still an opportunity actually to go back to Google at that time. They contacted me again in September 2021. Had a contract arranged with Alphabet, but then I got a call, hey, we're actually spinning out. Are you still interested in joining us? Which, of course, I had a bit mixed feelings. I mean, of course, Google, everyone knows who knew about Sandbox at that time. And then have really been enjoying it, been enjoying this transition into industry, and in particular the focus of Sandbox on, what are things that we can do in the wider quantum space that have a real market and real impact today. And I think it's a great place at this point in time to be at Sandbox.
All right, Mads, your turn.
Okay, so my story, longer than Max. I was born, raised in Iran, in a very small but ancient city in the south of Tehran. We had these ruins of some temples goes back, God knows, more than 3,000 years ago. Next, behind in our house. So that was the kind of environment. It was a very mixed society. We had in our neighborhoods Armenians. They are Orthodox, Christians, my family, traditional, Muslims. We had Jews. So, although officially, in our country, majority are Muslims, but you would be surprised how many heterogeneous, neighborhoods you would find in our country. So I was born, raised in that neighborhood. Then I went to the university. I started with chemistry. Sharif University of Technology, which is kind of the most prestigious university in Iran, but anyhow, I didn't enjoy that much the university in Iran for many reasons. Basically, I always felt that I'm not learning that much new things. I already know everything that I learned at high school. It could have been due to the fact that, I attended this international competition for chemistry Olympiad. I got a gold medal, and basically I learned everything that people would learn at the undergrad level. I think that was the main reason. The rest of my story is lots of randomness. So I attended this conference, Italy. I met this lady who was experimentalist, Frascati lab, and she told me okay, what are your interests? I said chemistry background, I love quantum. She said, go to Trieste. They have one of the strongest schools on quantum, especially quantum foundation, and just go there. That's the place for you. And thanks God that I met her. I listened to her. I went there, and I had the happiest 6 years of my life there. Doing my grad studies, University of Trieste, our office next to the Mediterranean Sea, next to the Miramar Castle, best place in the world to do your grad studies. So I become a quantum physicist by training. The Italian higher education system is very old school. Basically fundamental question, taking your time, understanding the nature. It doesn't have at all that business touch or corporate touch that the American higher education system has. I never felt any pressure of let's write down grants, let's publish, etc. It was a very slow pace, but very, very serious research. I'm very proud that research that I did, later on, European Space Agency, they are planning to do the experiments that I proposed, and they are going to do it in a few years. So that tells a lot, the level and the quality of the research that I did. Then I moved to the States. Sadly, the postdocs that I had here in the States, UC Riverside, worst experience of my life. It's mostly, going back to those days, it's mostly because I came from a very traditional way of thinking about science and technology, and suddenly surrounded by this quantum computing guys, I had all the tools, but I didn't know every week they want progress, every week I have to report, and every week we have to discover something new. And for me it was gosh, give me a break, it's let me understand. And I realized at least for that group, understanding had a very specific meaning. So I suffered. Eventually, I resigned. And then, I decided, I said, done with academia. I want to settle in this great country. And by the way, by pure chance, we ended up in LA, Los Angeles. So that's another story that, we should discuss about that. If I had ended up in any other American cities, I think, I would have just gone back, But LA, oh gosh, I love it. I hate traffic, but I love Los Angeles. It's such a heterogeneous, city. It has mountain. I love mountain. It has, ocean. I love ocean. So, that's the place for me. And in a sense, you guys, you may know, we are kind of neighbors, me and Denise. So I resigned from my postdoc. I had my first kid, happy life, settling in beautiful Los Angeles, and I decided to provide for my family by teaching, because I can teach anything. I was affiliated with in Europe with chemistry department, physics department, electrical engineering department, and throughout these years I taught many different courses. So I just went I asked my friends, okay, look, no pressure. Good money, and they told me, okay, initially community colleges are the best. And I said, okay, I'm fine. I'm going to use my high school knowledge, but I'm happy as far as I can provide for my family. So for 2 years, it was just teaching community colleges. I was just reading, papers, publishing on my own. But I was lucky that I met Stephen Wolfram, the CEO of Wolfram Research, and I learned from him. I owe him a lot. I learned from him, and I'm trying to kind of do the same what he did. He's great in, not that I'm a big talent, but he's great in discovering talents. People that most other organizations, they kind of maybe not see the value, but he see and he give people the opportunity. So I came to the States 2015, and 2019 I started at Wolfram Research. And now I'm here, I built a quantum team there. We have a great framework to do quantum computation. And with the help of people in this community, like you guys, we are forging, partnership, and we are doing full-scale quantum.
All right, Preeti.
Well, so I think my journey is a little bit of commonality with yours in that it was very random, and most of it was defined by things I didn't want to do. I barely ever knew what I wanted to do. So I grew up in India. I was born and raised in India in a small industrial town called Jamshedpur, which exists around India's first steel plant. So it's a very sort of a professional town, very cosmopolitan, but you're a success if you're an engineer or doctor. Lawyers, not really even thought about. So when I did high school there, studied science, but again, like I mentioned, I knew that I didn't want to do science. I was like in this class with like very intense people, and all I knew was I wanted to get away from them. And so I thought about applying to schools in the US. This is mid-90s. India's economy had just liberalized, so it was like this complete shot in the dark. As luck turned out, I got a scholarship. I came to the US. It was my first time leaving India. It was like really my first time being on a plane. I came to Yale to do my undergrad. Very confusing, intense, amazing 4 years. I thought I wanted to be a journalist. I took classes in history and psychology and all these things, and realized I had this huge gap. I'd never studied Western philosophy or didn't really know history other than Indian history. So it was really much easier to stick to science. So I ended up doing a degree in applied physics. But I think I took like half my classes in like outside of science because I kept thinking that I wanted to be a journalist and do something else. Then when I finished undergrad, I still didn't know what I wanted to do. So I went to grad school because, well, gave me some more time to sort of figure it out. And a lot of this had to do with the fact that, I was an immigrant. I was I was very aware that I was absorbing an enormous number of things. I enjoyed it all, but it took a lot of time. So I really needed that time in grad school. I thought it then, and I thought it now, that it really helped me figure out how to live in a culture outside of my own. So I did my grad school at Cornell in experimental condensed matter physics in an area called spintronics, which in many ways is sort of a precursor to quantum computing. It's an adjacent technology. And when I was finishing grad school, quantum technologies were just sort of coming into the limelight. But as 7 years in Ithaca, which is like beautiful, gorgeous place, but deathly cold for someone who grew up in India, was really hard. And I spent a lot of time in lab, doing low temperature experiments. Most of which failed, as these experiments normally do. By the end of grad school, all I knew was I did not want to be in a lab doing research. I really loved the area. I loved the science and technology, but again, I just knew I didn't want to be in a lab. And then, as life is not just things that you do professionally, but while in grad school, I'd met my partner, who was a few years ahead of me, and as I was finishing grad school, I was kind of thinking about what's my next step. As it turned out, my partner had a job in Montreal, so I was like, well, I don't really have a job in the, I'm not American. At the time, I could have stayed in the US on 1 year using my OPT, or I could go to Montreal, and at the time I thought, Canada actually has easier immigration rules, so that could be easier. So I went to Canada, and I had been contemplating a career transition, but going to a place, again, that I didn't know at all, I had no network, and doing a career transition, that's really hard. So I ended up doing a postdoc, which is sort of follows naturally from grad school, in a national lab while thinking about other careers. And I started thinking about patents and IP as a way of combining my background in science and technology, my love for learning about new things, and writing. But I was living in Quebec, where you really need to know French to have a professional career. It took me a couple of years to learn French. In the meanwhile, it was hard to be in lab as well as do all these other things. So I taught for 2 years as a way of sort of bridging that gap. And then finally, I got my first job in IP, and that ended up being in Ottawa. So I had to move to Ottawa. So this is like a series of random transitions. And I will note that I went from New Haven to Ithaca to Montreal to Ottawa, which is even colder than Montreal. So this is definitely like, not a trajectory I was aiming for. But it's, I had to do it because I wanted this career. And so for about 9 years, I worked in different law firms doing patents. I worked at a boutique law firm. I started my career in patents in 2008, July, 2 months before the big recession. I was in a small firm of 100 people that had 3 rounds of layoffs. I was the last person hired before the layoffs. I survived 3 years. And then I moved back to Montreal because I got an opportunity to be at a law firm there. But anyway, after 9 years of working in law firms, it's a natural transition to think about the next step, and a natural thing to think about is being in-house, so either at a company or at a university. And at the time, as luck turned out, my partner and I had an opportunity to come to Chicago. And so I came to Chicago, and I was looking around, and University of Chicago had launched its quantum program in a big way, and they were just really exploding, both in quantum and just like building this engineering and translational culture. University of Chicago used to be this like very intellectual, we believe in science, we don't believe in doing useful things kind of place, and it was just going in the complete opposite direction. This was just a wonderful opportunity. So I took a job in the tech commercialization office at the university, and worked with researchers at the university in helping them commercialize their research, develop their IP portfolios, spin-off companies, helping them sort of think about how you can take your research further to create impact. And then after that, I was working with a lot of the faculty in the quantum area because of my background. And I got this opportunity at the Chicago Quantum Exchange to head industry partnerships. And I have to say also that just going back to University of Chicago in this field, it just felt like my life had come full circle. So I had gone away from science, away from research. I was working with I did a lot of work on snowmobiles and ski-doos and sea-doos because that was my biggest client, Bombardier in Montreal. Nothing to do with quantum. But coming back here, I was working with a lot of people I knew in grad school, and it was just like, it was really bizarre but wonderful, sort of circumstantial luck. And yeah, I've been there for 3 years. Again, helped, as part of my job there, I started thinking about how can we do this? How can we take the research that's being done and create more opportunities for translation, for impact? And that was how I thought about, we really need to have an accelerator for quantum startups, and that was a big effort. Everything we do is collaborative, and we launched Duality. So now that's what I do. I work with researchers, I work with industry, I work with startups, and absolutely love it.
Great, thank you. Ming.
Yeah, well, those are all great stories. I think for my story, I would say up front that I think, the one theme I want to emphasize, I think I am very lucky, like to end up where I am, and I think, maybe echoing the whole sort of international workforce, I think everyone who succeeds in this field, there are, not everything is as they expected, but like, I think luck plays a big role, and especially for me, I think, I grew up, I was born and grew up in China, in Beijing, so I was lucky there. I didn't grow up in a rural place in China. I grew up in Beijing. My family was, not well off, but like they provided very well for me. I was able to, go to good high schools and, pass the college exams, to be able to go to Peking University. Anyone who knows the Chinese education system knows, it's a very competitive examination, but people who's from Beijing has an advantage, right, over people from the rural area. So, I'm definitely the lucky one. And, for us, we had to choose what we want to study. Like, we don't get to go into university and, spend a year or two to decide. We have to decide before we enter. So, I really wanted to do physics, like that always interested me, but my parents are like, that's not gonna make any money for you, you're gonna have a hard life, so don't do that. So I sort of compromised, and then we chose electronics, so it's in a school of computer science and electronics engineering. But luckily that's sort of a new school that they formed, and part of the school actually was split off from the physics department some years ago, and they're doing quantum there. So there are some professors there who are doing like, BECs, and there are some who are doing like quantum repeaters and relays, quantum communication type of stuff. So I was like, yeah, this is my opportunity to try to do a little physics. So I took that opportunity, I went with that direction. Ended up like also having a math degree, and then I tried to, then the next step is to apply for grad school, and I had no clue how to apply for American schools. So I applied for a bunch of schools and just like sending my GPAs and letters and like have no idea what I'm doing. So I got a lot of rejections, and finally got one school, that's University of Toledo, which definitely not something that I imagined I would do. But again, I think I was very lucky because the professor there, who is Dr. Gao, who is like a mentor to me, and he encouraged my curiosity in physics, and the time I spent there was really very important time for me to grow into the field of learning quantum. And the research I did there is sort of less relevant. It's in cold atomic collisions and molecular physics type of things. But that sort of gave me the sense that I can do physics. There's a way for me to do it. So after that, I think like again, I wanted to pursue my passion in physics. So I was looking around to see where I should be going. One of the connections was, okay, there's a professor at NIST, Professor Svetlana Kolochikova. Again, she's I was very lucky to have her as my mentor. As a postdoc, so I did a few years of postdoc at NIST, but I spent like that's kind of three years already as a postdoc, and it's time to think about the next move. And throughout the whole time, I was looking, okay, if I want to do physics, the traditional route is to go be a professor, but as a theorist, it's very competitive in the US to find a position, especially in places that's, less rural. Since I grew up in Beijing, I kind of don't want to move to somewhere that's very rural. So I have a preference for geological locations. So it's very hard to do that. But luckily, sort of quantum at the time, and that was about 2019, that was, was booming. So I applied to IonQ, which was a ion-trapped quantum computing company, and they, again, I was lucky that they chose me since they are a hardware company. Usually they hire experimentalists. I was the first AMO theorist that they hired. I mean, of course, they had other theorists before me, but they hired me into their experimental group and sort of embraced me within the technical team. And that was, I learned a lot from that team and from other people at the company. The good part of that is always like I get to do physics, the things I love, and I get to do that in an industry setting, which pays a lot better than going if I were to go into academia. But by 2022, that was the middle of the pandemic. We had, me and my wife had a kid at the time, and we were thinking about life. We really feel like we wanted to move to the West Coast, and I wanted a change in my career to do a little bit of different physics. So I looked around, and I was able to with again good luck that people in my life, especially Denise, also helped to look for my next step, which is atom computing up in Berkeley. So I was able to, join atom computing to do a different kind of physics, right? There's neutral atom, there's rebirth physics, which is really fascinating. That's why I'm here, and I feel like every step of the way I was very lucky. I got people to help me. I have, circumstantial things that help me to achieve what I am, where I am today. So that is sort of my story.
That's great. We are running low on time, even though it's been interesting. And if you could talk about what your biggest challenge was in all these moves, maybe in the US, maybe somewhere else, but if you had someone that could have helped you with just one thing, what would it have been? Is it cultural? Is it kind of bank accounts? What would that thing be? So Preeti, let's start with you.
A playbook of everything that you need to know. It's funny in that, now that I kind of support startups, that's the kind of thing we do. And I often think I wish I had that when I first moved here, because you just don't know what you don't know. I remember the first year, I didn't know I had to file taxes until the evening before it was due. But things like that, maybe everything's available on the internet, but it's still it's just you need to have people around you who can tell you what you need to do, and you need to it's nice to have access to resources. So if you need to go through immigration, someone tell you you should look up this person or go with this firm, things like that. Yeah, and I think just realizing that there's challenges that immigrants have that others don't. On top of that, just having to deal with the logistics of having family far away or having to navigate this cross-continental existence can be hard.
Mads.
Culture. I wonder, have you seen maybe whoever visited Italy or any Italian movie, when they sit on it, I don't know, eating dinner together on a table, talking, shouting, everyone is talking with everyone, it's noisy, non-stop interrupting each other. That's also typical Persian culture. That goes with scientific discussion too. Whenever we had group meetings, we were shouting, we were interrupting each other. That's how we do science. Or again, talking about Italy, because it's the same, back in Iran, jokes are God, religion. If you remove these two factors from our jokes, both cultures, Italy and Iran, we have no more jokes. Now bring these two features, which is basically the most common behaviors. American culture, no. Learning those tricks, it needs somebody who understand that you're coming from a different background and not being judgmental. Like if you're just open to this, like, to this feeling that, look, this guy, he could be different. He's gonna learn fast, but let's give him some room. Like, for me, like, that cultural transition, that was the most difficult thing. Even right now, I'm learning, like, how, different classes of society, what are the norms, et cetera, et cetera. So if any, basically, a playbook on the culture, especially because what I learned is Italian culture, they are very explicit about their expectations. For example, like, you see how I dress? This is how you should dress even when you want to dispose your garbage at night in Italy, okay? American culture is not that much explicit about their expectation. Like, you have to read between the lines. And that makes the life of an immigrant like me much, much more complicated.
Now, Max, you were born here, but you've certainly moved a lot. What have your biggest challenges been?
Well, I think, first, I guess, I would second what Preeti and you have said. I think one thing that I need to sometimes remind myself is it's okay if things feel hard, or it's okay if things feel different, but that definitely took me a long time, especially after I had moved for the first time. And actually, just over the weekend, I was kayaking with some friends, talked to a girl who was a postdoc at Stanford, now also working here in the Valley at a company, and she told a very similar story also, that like after a couple of months was this point where just everything felt hard. You don't read, you've made some friends, but it's maybe not the tightest connection yet. You haven't really gotten used to culture. And maybe my cultural story that I always like telling is, I'm from Germany. I think Germans are rather direct. I'm also a direct person. You come to Canada, and then people are like, wow, turn it down. You're the most direct person I've ever, I like it, but, sometimes. And then I went to the Netherlands, and then I was not direct enough, right? Like, so this is like these kind of like differences between countries where you just have to constantly recalibrate, where are you at? Like, I've really been in situations where I was like, found out I wasn't explicit enough in what I was saying, right? Like, there's a very drastic difference there. And I think here in the US, well, it's of course more the Canadian way, I would say, maybe a little bit tuned down, but yeah.
Great, and Ming?
Yeah, I think I just want to echo everybody has said. I think something that lays out what we should be doing, instead of we have to find all the information ourselves through different channels, especially when the time where internet was not too bad. I think for now, like, it's easier if you have access to internet. But also, like with what Max was saying, like to have some personal touch to reaffirm that things that you're doing is fine, right? Like there's never a dead end, and there's things that things will move along and be okay. I think those are really, really important, even though they're sort of softer kind of things. So I think something that could provide that would be like a community or like an organization that allows these things to happen. So provide information, provide support, provide mentorship. I think there are various type of type of organization or places to support you throughout sort of education. Like in universities, there are offices like that, and maybe professionally, there are professional organizations or immigrant organizations you can find. But I think you always have to also seek them out. So like, for an industry like us, or for maybe including larger educational institutions, like, if there are a place for people to find these supports and information, I think that would be probably the most useful, to just shortcut to what you need, right?
All right, thank you. It looks like we're getting thrown off the stage. So thank you, everybody, and we're all going to stick around a little if you have questions. We'd love to answer them or the panel would love to answer them about their experiences. So thank you.